But if you don't have the ID, there contextual, you can go already really far because you still have all the other hundreds of attributes. Okay, the ID is gone, but you can still leverage everything else. And especially if you combine it with your history of like whatever you have already done with the bitstream, right? You have a history of understanding.
Every mobile marketer knows that scan is challenging. SKI Ad Network on iOS. Only 9% of mobile marketers that we surveyed in a recent webinar said, hey, we've got it working well. One particular problem, of course, is targeting. You don't have IDFAs, you don't have traditional audiences, you don't have the old behavioral targeting options. So you can't say, I want people who play Metaverse Tetris, because they might also be interested in my Metaverse Tetris. One of the other options, of course, for targeting is contextual targeting, but how effective can it get? To find out, we're chatting with Remerge CEO Pan Katsukis. Welcome, Pan.
John, it's an honor being here with you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much for coming, and thank you for having patience. Nobody knows this, but I'm going to reveal it right now. We had such trouble connecting this technology. I mean, what do we know about technology, right? We're just in the industry. Anyways, we are finally here. We're connected, and I'm kind of pumped to have this discussion because it's really critical. Targeting is absolutely essential. I mean, obviously you need great creative, you need a great experience, you need a great app. Everything needs to work, but if you can't target people who might be interested, well, that's the problem a lot of people are having right now. Let's start here. What does context mean in in-app ads? I mean, we kind of know what it means on the web, the old-fashioned, right? It's the sport fishing magazine or newsletter or something, and I'm putting my ad there because I have, I don't know, an angling rod or something like that. What's it mean in-app?
Yeah, so context is obviously not something new. So we always have that there. And in the end, it can be any signal or attribute that we know about the current situation of the user. Yeah, the simplest one is, what time is it right now? What time of the week is it right now? What type of app are they using, right? The publisher, how long have they been using it? So any signals which come by the publisher and the app itself, like the app rating, you can find out the category the app is at. That gives you some information and understanding, like what the user is up to right now, where they're interested, where they're engaging with. And this can be used in order to drive like a good creative to the user to send them there, and ideally so that they are also engaging with the ad themselves. That's like the interest of the advertiser.
Yeah, and so that's a little different, right? I mean, on the web, you can sort of have something spidering, some content, you know, what that article is about, what that page, what that video is about, you know, you've got some natural language processing, whatever, and you can place an ad there. On mobile, you're saying it's a little different, but you have other signals like time of week, time of day. You know, it's midnight, maybe somebody wants a midnight snack, or it's supper time, or it's morning, maybe they're on their commute. So that has some aspects of what you can get to get relevant. But of course, you also know what the app is, you know what category it's in, so that helps. Is there a sense in which you can do contextual targeting that's more relevant to what somebody's doing immediately, more relevant than behavioral targeting might be?
Yeah, like especially in areas where the signals are very strong, the contextual signals compared to actually who is the user behind it. And you named a really good example, like food delivery is a special case for that, where you try to show ads exactly in the context where the user would then install the app or like order food. Yeah, and for example, they are looking through recipes, so they're hungry, they want to get inspiration, and that's good timing. Or also even when they're looking at entertainment sites, yeah, looking for a new movie they want to watch. So maybe you can also serve that. Why not combine it with a really good, nice meal from your neighborhood restaurant? So this is like a very strong context, and that applies to normally everyone out there. So that's, I think, contextual is stronger than if you just focus on one ID or one user specifically.
That's quite interesting, actually. Are there verticals that contextual doesn't really work for, or are there verticals that it seems like there's verticals that it's better for, right? Certainly if I'm looking at recipes, I don't want to do that work. Somebody just make it and send it to me. Awesome. Great. Are there some verticals where it just doesn't work as well?
So you have like some verticals, especially when it's super niche, where you really want to target this specific, very small audience. So then you might know already the users or IDs. You have like a group of users, and that's where behavioral can get better rather than looking at the 100 attributes and then trying to create like a very small individual segment, which is then maybe a bit more difficult and challenging to create. But I think for the majority of advertisers out there who are like really large advertisers, contextual, you can go quite far already with contextual.
Interesting. And behavioral has its own issues, right? I mean, like, I like the game I'm playing, sure, you've got another similar one, but I like this one already.
Yeah.
So, why am I jumping ship and starting all over again and grinding through 50 levels to get halfway decent in your game, right? So there are some challenges there. Talk in general, or maybe some specifics actually, how good can contextual targeting get? Can you relate that to the IDFA based targeting? Can it get half as good? Can it get twice as good? Can it get 75% as good? Where can somebody rank it?
Yeah. So I think when you look at that, you exactly like you said, you somehow have to look at the different inventory types. Yeah. When do I have an ID? Usually contextual is already used on top with the ID. Yeah, so you look at exactly all the factors, what's the time, what's the environment, and then you use also the ID information, and then you try to combine it. And then obviously if you take the ID as a signal out of that, usually contextual can't be that good because it's an important factor which you can take into account on top of that. That's why contextual only, what you would do in an ID environment, just like usually is not as good as a contextually alone. But if you don't have the ID, there contextual, you can go already really far because you still have all the other hundreds of attributes. Okay, the ID is gone, but you can still leverage everything else. And especially if you combine it with your history of like whatever you have already done with the bitstream, right? You have a history of understanding, okay, what happens in that context? Do I get conversions actually on this publisher in that at that time in this region, or is it actually never happening? So you also have like some history which you can use there. So it gets already really strong. And also what you can, especially when you look at this right now at the inventory, when there is no ID out there, it's still, and I looked it up just today, 53% cheaper. Yeah. So, and that's obviously like an opportunity for an advertiser to tap into and just figure out, okay, can I get as far with contextual only without an ID while still having the opportunity to bid 53% lower because the inventory is lower as there's not much competition right now.
There's a lot to unpack in what you just said, actually, because I would presume that significant publishers and pretty much any publisher, app publisher, should be doing tests on contextual, pure contextual, to just determine the things that you said, to test, hey, how good can I get? How effective can I be? What kind of cohorts do I attract? What kind of users do I attract? Are they different than what I used to use for my targeting? That's very interesting. The other thing that you said that's super interesting is, hey, I might only be half as good at targeting, but I am paying 50% the price. It's a wash in the end. But one thing I wanted to dive into, you said hundreds of factors, right? Contextual signals. That's interesting. So you've got time, you got week, day of week, you've got device, you've got rough location, I'm guessing, coarse location. What other kinds of signals are we looking at?
So I said you get like a lot of with the bitstream. So when I'm talking programmatically, you see like a lot of other factors like also Wi-Fi connection, or are they like using cellular? Are they all on the go or not? Or you have also in the bitstream specifically, the price, like floor price, the range, what type of information. So you can just like look at the IAB catalog and see all the signals you can have there. And some signals are more important for an environment some are not that important. 100 is maybe just like the pure maximum, maybe what is out there, and not every one is relevant. But I think like one important point for that, because it's so many and you don't always know specifically for an advertiser what's really relevant and what not, and what has an impact and what not, is also that you can't really get far with contextual if you all do it manually. Yeah, the case what we have, let's target everyone at 7 p.m. on a Friday after work. Yeah, so they will order food. So that's an easy example, but like if you want to scale that, if you want to like be really good, it's nowadays you can use and leverage machine learning to just like look at all the history, everything what has been done, and even that for that like use the ID inventory, try to understand and like what's working and so on, and try to make connections with the different other signals you see there, and then do some models and some trainings. Okay, now remove the ID. What does the algorithm tell you to do in that different environment? So that's the theory, right? And it's doable. But also one point, or I think also what you said, what we were discussing about, why is it actually so cheap, the inventory? And the biggest problem is not so much the targeting, and yes, it's doable with all the signals, but the measurement is the issue, right? That's a different field, which we actually are not touching, but obviously it's affecting performance marketing, because like, okay, what are you being measured? And that is also like different, and but it's still an important factor for the advertisers to understand if it's working
Absolutely.
or not.
Absolutely. I mean, certainly on Android, you've still got a GID. On iOS, you're pretty much guaranteed not to have an IDFA or not to have a usable one, because you got to have it on both sides of the equation. So that is interesting. You've got to rely on scan for your measurement on the iOS side, which has some challenges, but can be done as well. That brings up an interesting point. Sure, on Android, we do have an ad identifier right now. We know that's going away. We know that's going to be sunsetted. Google has literally said that. Privacy Sandbox for Android is definitely coming. It has the Topics API, which should allow some level of behavioral targeting. How do you look at that? How do you see that? Do you see that as useful? Do you see that as fairly limited in its current spec? Let's put it that way. What's your thought? What's your thinking there?
Yeah, so obviously the current situation where everything works and with the ID, it's definitely always easier.
Yes.
So with that, and I think where Google's approach is good is that they have APIs, they have like test environments where you can test it and where you can really compare, okay, am I good enough with the APIs they're offering with the Topics API or Fletch? So am I able to just like deliver the same performance or similar performance with those new tools? And it's not always like everything worse, because it also gives an opportunity, because I think for us, when we are only looking into app only, the biggest advantage, what we are also seeing with the Google Sandbox, is that there should be in the end a seamless bridge between web and app. So where right now it's like, okay, if we have a technology, usually it's app only, or you have like the big other players, the web players, they do web only. And yes, they say, oh, we also can do app, or we say, oh, we also do mobile. That is like different, yeah. And as soon as you try to, the user switches from one device to the next, it's like a huge challenge. And usually, yeah, exactly. So it's not working. But when you have like a really proper design, to have like one clear privacy, like good privacy safe environment, it's an environment which works throughout like all browsers, all apps out there. And that means, okay, well, now we can actually see where are the audiences. Are they using like mobile web? And I can seamlessly bring them to the app, or even if they are using an app and there is a form on a website or so, I can also do that seamlessly. So there are some elements which help, and also like solving some things which are not being done. So that's maybe the positive side, but it will be tough. Like I see it already right now. And if you talk with the with different other folks in the industry. It's a huge investment everybody has to do. And we are not like giants like Google or Apple who can do that easily, or who don't even have to do that easily, obviously. But for us, yeah, we need to catch up somehow to play by the rules and deliver like similar good experiences for advertisers. Otherwise, yeah, everything is on risk. And so, but Google gives us a little bit time, yeah, and we see they're always delaying it a little bit because it's we are not this far again, but they're putting the pressure up, so you don't want to risk your whole business. But yeah.
No, you don't. I do like that there's going to be one privacy model for Android and the web, and that makes a ton of sense. And iOS is still its own little kingdom, and that's probably not going to change. What is nice in Privacy Sandbox is you do have Fledge, which you mentioned, right? So there is the possibility for privacy safe retargeting. We don't have that in Scan yet. Hopefully Apple will create something along the same lines there as well. Let's get back to contextual ads. I want to talk a little bit about it from the user side. The psychology of seeing a contextual ad versus a behaviorally targeted ad, because they're very different things, right? I mean, now theoretically, as you mentioned, the behaviorally targeted ad that is using an ad ID knows something about your past, knows about something what you did or what you like or what you used in the past, but also uses the context of the present. But I'm sure you've seen, and I've seen a ton of ads that they're definitely behaviorally targeted, but they're not related at all to my current environment. And that's a different psychology, isn't it?
Yes, like I think behavioral targeting and why it's so bad, has a bad perception outside because you have like the really bad cases, and they are especially
I know
also
what you
coming
did
from web
last
where you
summer.
have like a lot of yeah, exactly. Like also because you have a lot of ads filling in like the whole article you're reading right now, and they are then full with the items you have just purchased yesterday, and your partner is like next to you and sees like, oh, where do you spend the money again, right? What are you looking at? The present for me? So, and they feel like really naked psychologically. This is exactly something privacy wise. They know they didn't give the consent actively. Maybe they've done, but it was like somewhere hidden, and they don't know where did I put the marker to say yes. And that's I think the worst case. You can be obviously not as intrusive by still understanding like, hey, you were playing a lot of strategy games in the past, so I will show you also similar strategy games which might fit exactly the same setup like how you've been behaved in the past, and then they see it like an add-on, yeah. So it's yeah, actually, why not? It's good. Or yeah, so it can. I mean, in the end, also why companies and marketers are doing it is because it converts, it works somehow, and they look at them at the numbers. But yeah, like it's the end user is not maybe really something they like seeing so much. When you're
Yeah,
not
and I
doing
think
that
there's
right,
something
yeah.
comforting in a sense, if an ad can be comforting about contextual targeting. You know, you've got the ad for, I don't know, free hero next to the article you're reading on food or something like that. You get it. You
Yeah.
understand it. It makes sense. It's in context. It's in flow of what you're currently doing. And so there's something that fits for that. That makes some sense. Talk a little bit about.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
and it's like so. I just wanted to add that end users know that when they buy a magazine about like the shoes and new sports shoes, obviously they see ads of sports shoes. Yeah, so like and people think like, okay, that's fine. I can expect that, and that's very similar also with contextual ads. And that's like the whole design going forward. It's always like a group of audiences, and they are part of that, and they think like that, so that will be okay. They won't have the feeling, okay, that's exactly that one item I was looking at yesterday.
That is
So much,
actually a really interesting point you bring up because, and I understand that world is foreign to many people today, especially young people. But the world of magazines, there's still a lot of people who do that. But as it was, and as it still is for some people, you'd buy the magazine. Sometime I don't want to say you bought it as much for the ads as for the content, but you certainly looked at the ads. You certainly enjoyed the ads. You certainly, you bought Architectural Digest and you saw, oh wow, that's a nice sofa or something like that, right? I don't know that we've
Correct.
achieved that in digital advertising. I really don't know that we've achieved that level of excellence, I can put it that way, in digital advertising. Look into your crystal ball a moment. How do you see the future of targeting evolving?
Yeah, I think in the case what we were discussing about magazines, that's where we should get right, so that it really feels like high quality, good environment. Every ad really fits inside, but not personalized, but really contextual, and it's good, and people have a feeling it's all like fitting nicely together. So, but I mean, obviously, to get there, it's quite a challenge, and I think what is driving that really much forward is the privacy train just moves forward, right? There is no stop, because especially Google is doing that right now. For Apple, it was easier. They're just like rushing. Google coming behind, and a lot of legislation. I mean, the legislation in all the different countries with GDPR also, they started that first, right? And that's about like, okay, the large platforms can do that a little bit more aggressive and also more technically clear of how privacy should be done. But that's moving forward, and that's also how the ad industry will evolve, to just move away from that one by one ID selection and targeting and measurement to a more like, still better than magazines, because you can measure, you can
You had an
attribute
offer code.
even with
They had an
scan and
offer code.
doable, right? Yeah, exactly. So, and I mean, the point is also what I said. We are just starting also with the investments. Nobody was investing so much into contextual only or like alternative. Yeah, buying actually the traffic without an ID, because you had the challenge that the attribution providers were not measuring that really correctly. So it was anyway filtered out. No, nobody cared so much about that. And now it like there is more and more focus, because the majority of will just be without an ID floating around. So, but there's still the users, the valuable users behind that. Yeah. So there will be better technologies, better techniques and methods, and we are start learning to do that. But we are getting better and better. And again, I see then over time we might in the end be as good as newspapers.
Such an achievement. It is
Right?
interesting when we look at the future of targeting, right? There's a lot to fix. There's a lot to figure out. Privacy, the train is not stopping, as you mentioned. It's just not stopping. I think with Scan 4, I think with Privacy Sandbox for Android, and as those evolve and hopefully iOS adds some sort of retargeting mechanism, we'll see about that. There will be a good future ahead. I think that you're right. Measurement technologies need to evolve, need to adopt some, whether it's incrementality, whether it's media mix modeling, in addition to some of the more deterministic, even though they're aggregated versions of measurement, and have a whole sort of potpourri mix of measurement methodologies that together you get some sort of level of truthiness that you can say, hey, this is what's happening. I think the next major challenge is micro-targeting in a privacy safe way. So we know that the big players can do it. We know that the big brands can do it. They've done it for decades. They've literally done it for decades in worse measurement environments than we have right now, and worse than we're going to have with as privacy continues to tighten up. But can the small players reach the audience that they need to reach? And I think maybe part of the solution there is you start to see platforms develop audiences that are internal to what they offer, and you can access those audiences, but you don't really know a lot about them. You're not bringing an audience to them. They're saying these people are interested in this, and that is very niche to what I want. We'll see how that goes. I want to thank you for taking the time. and taking the hassle. We had such a challenge getting this set up and making it work.
Okay.
I really appreciate it.
Thanks, John. It was amazing. And let's see, maybe in 2-3 years, if we connect again, let's see where we are. And looking if we are as good as the newspapers in the end. I think measurement-wise, we get there. We get even better. So, but placing the ads in the right way, that would
Excellent. Thank you so much.